Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the virtual chapter for April 2022. What an exciting time we have been having. We got quite a program for you tonight. We have two feature presenters, or short presentations, and then we also have our the main event with our great friend James Hazlerig that you've all heard about and that has brought you here, and some wonderful announcements to make. And as a matter of fact, I think we might want to begin with the announcements. And I know, Karen, I didn't prep you for this, so please forgive me. But I've got them in sort of chronological order, so I bet you can help me back and forth with them. Because the first thing I need to announce is that Thursday, just 2 days from today, at this same time, on this same YouTube, the same link, the same Zoom link, you can click that link one more time and you'll be here for the presenter series. And Karen, who are we having on the presenter series this Thursday?
Well, I know for sure the first presenter is Karen Hand, and the second presenter is Shelley Stockwell Nicholas, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to be talking about doing the trance dance, how to really do an entire session from start to finish, intake to finish, and basically get all of the information from the client. Let the client do all the work. That's what it's about. And I'll be talking more about that on Thursday night. Shelley, quickly, what are you going to be talking about on Thursday?
I'm going to be talking about transpersonal hypnosis, the things that go beyond your personality, the things that some people call woo-woo, but I call wow, wow. And it's the material that lives within you, within your higher self, with all your all-knowing self, or within your all-gnawing self. So we're going to deal with higher self hypnosis. It's going to be a lot of fun, very experiential.
And the reason Shelley and I get to talk Thursday night, it's part of the presenters series, and we both have post-conference workshops after the conference in May. So we'll both be presenting for a full day on Monday, and of course, we'd love for you to stay after and join us for our full day workshops as well, right after the conference.
Lovely. Isn't it interesting to notice that Karen always has that information right at hand? I I just thought I said that. I'm sure you've heard it before, Karen. I love to laugh.
Never, never.
Yeah, nobody's ever even mentioned that before. Well, and then I would like to announce that on April 23rd, right here in Florida, for those of you who are members or want to be members or interested in being members or want to know what it's all about, the Hypnosis Education Association, our Florida group, has a one-day meeting in Oldsmar, Florida on April 23rd. We've got a good bevy of speakers. I can't go into all the details and stuff for you now, but it is just one day, and it's $35 if you are a member of the HEA. It is $60 if you are not. And for those of you who are far away, if you can't come to it, you could still sign up for it. And if you do, what you will get is you'll get a recording of all of the audios. So check that out if you're interested. It's heahypnosis.com is the place where you would find the information about that online. And there you go. And Karen, I'm wondering if you, this is a trivia question for you.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you know what's happening on April 29th.
April 29th.
In the
Let me in.
heart of America.
The Heartland Hypnosis
The
Conference?
Heartland Hypnosis Conference, April 29th through May 1st in St. Louis. I apologize that I don't have any information about it to share, other than I want to make sure those of you who know about that are at least informed about when it is. It's an annual conference in St. Louis, and really enjoyed and appreciated by a whole bevy of members. So anybody needs a last minute announcement or reminder about that, it is April 29th through May. Shelley, you've been to Heartland, have you not?
Yes, I've been at Heartland, and if you're interested in stage hypnosis in particular, they have a whole, I don't know, maybe 50 stage hypnotists there. And they really are very forthcoming with their routines and ideas. And so that's very interesting. And it's put on by
William Mitchell.
William Mitchell, who is a dynamic preacher and teacher. So I guess you might enjoy hanging out with him.
Now, stage hypnosis is something that originated in the old Wild West, I believe, on the Wells Fargo routes.
Well, You know,
Stage.
Orman McGill used to do the stage hypnosis during the spook shows in the middle of the night when they'd have a horror movie, and then the boys could put their arm around the girls in the theater, and he would do a magic show, and then to fill out his show, he got a 25-cent book on hypnosis and started doing hypnosis shows.
Lovely. Lovely, lovely. You know what, by the way, one really important lesson from stage hypnosis is just a little piece of trivia, but I think for me, it really is the thing that I think when folks go, hey, the stage hypnosis doesn't have anything to do with what we do. I'll tell you what stage hypnotists that have that most of us really could use a little bit more of, and that is the ability to think on your feet and to be responsive to whatever happens in the hypnotic interaction. They know it better than anybody else. So let's give a cheer for that as well as a exciting and important part of our legacy. So then May 10th, it's not a month from today, but it's next month's virtual chapter meeting. Karen, you want to talk about that one?
Yes, we'll have Carlos Casadas on. He'll be talking a little bit about NLP and a lot about shamanism and psychedelics and how you use hypnosis and those kind of areas. So it's going to be a very interesting thing about hypnosis and a little departure, maybe into another world.
Ooh, so bring your bong and come along.
There you go.
A lovely, lovely evening.
It'll be wonderful.
All right. So now, are we ready? Some of you have already opened your mailbox and seen the mail that came from Linda Otto today, and some of you may not have seen it yet. But we've had an interesting experience. One of the things that's really great, and I'm so proud of IACT for just this reason. You might remember that 2 years ago, in March of 2020, all of a sudden one day the curtain came down. You know, the COVID curtain came down and locked everything out. We were at that point 6 weeks away from the conference for 2020. And we put that thing all together, put it online, and gave the first complete online live Zoom hypnosis conference that I'm aware of. No, people have done various other variations, but I'm really pleased how quickly they got together and handled that sort of thing. Well, because we are a kind of people that, often we've been told, and I bet you have told people that that when life gives you lemons, you should make lemonade. But I'll tell you what IACT does. When life gives them lemons, they make margaritas. And I think that is so much better. So what's happened is we were suddenly taken by surprise by the Hilton Inn here in Orlando, where the conference was scheduled to be, to tell us that they could not accommodate our group. And they had some weird, confusing things about the reservations and all of that sort of stuff. Some internal problem of theirs entirely outside of our ability to do anything about, but they simply were not able to have us. So we scrambled and looked, and Robert and Linda got on the phone and called just about every darn hotel here in the Orlando area. And we found a great place, and I went and looked at it. So I'm the eyewitness to testify. We're going to be at the DoubleTree, Orlando. I think if you look it up, DoubleTree Orlando, what you'll find is DoubleTree Orlando at SeaWorld, because it is adjacent to SeaWorld property. Now, here's the thing, and here's why I say margaritas out of our lemons. Because for the same price, so it won't affect your costs at all. What we really are going to be on is a 23-acre resort with pools and ponds and like two lovely swimming pools, 1,000 guest rooms, by the way. It really is a big property. Four places to drink, 3 places to eat, and just all the wonderful concessions that you could hope to have. Beautiful indoor, outdoor kind of places, like especially with the dining areas and stuff. So I think you're really going to enjoy it. I was just thrilled, and I thought, oh my God, this little problem that we had with one hotel opened the doorway to this wonderful, wonderful place. So I think we're going to love it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. Like I said, no changes, except you will need to cancel your Holiday Inn hotel reservations if you've made them. And in the email that came out today, if you haven't seen it yet, there is a link that you can use to make your reservations with the new hotel. Of course, if you haven't registered for the conference at all, you need to do that with IACT or IMDHA. So do that through the websites. And maybe just really quickly, there is one thing I know that has changed, and it will probably only affect a few of you, but some of you bought box lunches that were part of the catering package from the Hilton Inn. Well, we're not going to do that, but there are plenty of grab and go kind of places and stuff at this property where if what you wanted to do is to get that and sit by the pool and have lunch, that's available as well. There's a breakfast buffet, a beautiful breakfast buffet, I might add, and I had lunch the day that I was there, and I loved the food, I loved the service, and I'll tell you what, I walked in the front door and there were 6 people to greet me. And, and I have never found a friendlier, more accommodating staff than this particular group. So I think it's going to be great. There is a shuttle bus that you can take if you don't really need to leave the property, except of course, some of you are excited about being in the land of magic here. So if you wish to, there is an $8 shuttle to Walt Disney World. There is a free shuttle to Universal Studios. There's a free shuttle to, SeaWorld, or you can walk because it literally is down the sidewalk from the place. And there's a trolley that goes down International Drive. We are at the end of International Drive. International Drive, for those of you who don't know, has a million. If we had gambling in Orlando, it would be the Strip. But meanwhile, it's, lots of hotels, but also entertainment venues and restaurants and clubs and, great things like that. And the Orlando Eye, if you want to ride around the big eye and see everything from the air, all of that stuff. So right there at the property, you might want to stay an extra day or two in order to really take some of that stuff in, because there's so much to do, so much closer than where we were before. So I'm looking forward to it. And that's all there is to say about that for the moment. But check it out. When you see the email, you'll also see a link to look at the property. They even have a virtual tour of the property on their website. So give it a look. And there we go. How about that?
How about that? It's pretty cool. And we need to get some business done. I mean, the business of getting to our business for tonight, getting to our feature.
Yes. So great. So our first feature, as a matter of fact, I mentioned we do have a couple of them, and I hope you'll forgive that I'm not going to give a long, thorough introduction. But a lady that I absolutely love. She truly embodies, I think, that spirit of supportive presence to the world, which is, as hypnotists, one of the things that we really could do a little bit more of. Her name is Mary Vasan. Mary is online with us tonight. So Mary, please open up your microphone so we can talk to you. And Mary has got this great project going on called mindgift.org. And Mary, I'm going to let you tell us all about it.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mary Vasan, and I recently created a platform which offers free mental health resources to anyone, anywhere. And the background is that I have been private coaching and doing hypnosis since about 2012. Some of my teachers are John Overdorf, Melissa Tiers, Michael, and many more. And what I was finding is that although I coached a lot of what I would call leaders and high achievers, that was my niche. What I really enjoyed the most was working pro bono with foster kids who are aging out of the system and women leaving abusive relationships and things like that. And for some time, I wanted to do something completely in the nonprofit, but I wasn't sure how to scale it. And then I was watching the horrific news coverage of the Ukraine. And I just said, this is it. I've got to do something now, and I'll figure it out. And so I basically started contacting people that I think are incredible teachers and practitioners in the industry. And some of you I was stalking. Karen, you might have gotten a couple emails from me, but maybe they bounced. They didn't bounce back to me. I don't know, but you were on my initial list. But
Checking
you
my
were.
junk folder now.
I know you had a surgery going on and all kinds of things. So, in any case, so what happened is that I contacted a number of people, and virtually everyone said yes. And so, if you go to mindgift.org, you can see the site, which is still under construction, but we have enough critical mass now that you can get an idea of what it looks like and what it's sort of where it's going. So it's organized by categories of topics such as anxiety and stress relief, where we have a wholeness work meditation by Connie Ray Andreas. We also have a really beautiful recording called Keep Calm and Carry On by Roger Elliott from Hypnosis Downloads. And amazing, we have from Melissa Tiers her entire anti-anxiety course. It's a 4-hour course, but it's in really nice segments from 3 to 25 minutes. So it's super digestible. And, this is meant for clients because it's from a class she taught to people with anxiety. And there's a bunch of other stuff in the anxiety and stress release area. And then we have areas of health. We need more in there. We don't have anything on weight loss. We don't have anything for caregivers. We have a couple people working on moving through illness. We have a category called Starting New. This was, in my mind, specifically targeted for people affected by the war. So I wrote some scripts for starting new after tragedy, and starting new with confidence. So if you don't have tragedy necessarily, but you're doing something new and you need confidence, that's in there. We have a whole trauma section, and we have videos on tapping, breathing techniques, havening, things like that. We definitely need more in trauma. We need more in grief, for sure. Basically, in general, we need more content. And as you'll see in the site, we've been very selective, and the recordings are high quality. The content I hope you'll find is high quality. And what I would like to ask all of you is to join us in contributing content. If you feel like you have something that is readily available that you could just send us, that we could put up, or create something. If you would like to create something specifically for people that you feel called to help. It could be people affected by the war in some area in which you feel that you really want to contribute, or it could be not having to do anything with the war, but just to a particular segment of the population that you feel like should be served by something that you could offer. And also, if you could share this, even though we still are in beta technically, and we're still launching it now, if you could put it on your website, share it with people, share it in your social media, because there already is so much great content on there. We've got some stuff from John Overdorf. Kaz Riley is going to be contributing something for, I asked her to create something for women whose boundaries have been violated. And so that's coming. There's more in the pipeline, but there's already so much for people that can't afford to come to for a private consult. But even though I haven't even published this yet on my social media or gone out publicly at all, the only place I've talked about it is in the Hypnotic Women group. That's it. I already had a couple people contact me and say, "Oh, do you know if Melissa Tiers is available for sessions?" Because they just went on and started listening to her course. So I think it will lead people to practitioners if someone resonates with the person's content. But the purpose of it really is more about us giving back, of course, and just serving people that otherwise would not have access to individual hypnotists. or other practitioners. So if you know of someone that you think needs to be on here, I know I've been hounding Michael, and he said he's coming. He'll contribute something. And thank you so much, Michael, and for this opportunity. If anyone has questions, I can answer. But thank you all for everything you do already. And I would really love to connect with any of you about contributing.
How do we contact you?
So on the website, well, you can just send me an email, Mary, MARI, at mindgift.org. There's also the info at mindgift is on the website. But yeah, that's probably the easiest.
In fact, yeah, if you just go to the website too, mindgift.org, you can really see what it's about. And there is a link there to click in order to contribute. So Mary, I love that you're here. I appreciate that you're doing this, and I hate to rush really quick, but we've got to move on. We're way behind, and thanks to Microsoft and the wonderful start they gave me. So we have a second feature scheduled. In fact, Jessica, if you'd open up your microphone, Jessica Hansen, and I wanted to talk to her tonight. Jessica, I'm going to ask you, and I hope you will forgive me. I want to just give some headlines about what you're up to and why I had you here, and maybe we can get you on the next month's program or some place to talk about it more fully. But just a quick question for you. Jessica's been doing something really interesting, and this is why I wanted her to talk to you. We're always looking for ways to market, that other people aren't doing, and asking and questioning what's the best way to do this and how do I get the word out there. And Jessica, who is one of our CMTs, by the way, at IACT, posted that she was going to job fairs. And I thought, oh my God, I haven't thought about that for a long time. Job fairs, health fairs, things like that. And, I believe from what she has said so far, it's really kind of working out to be a nice experience for her. So I hope that's enough to pique your interest. Jessica, again, my apologies and my so appreciation that you're here, but we're going to have some conversation about this. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That
is good.
we got 4 letters in. I got to let you say a little bit more than that. So Jessica, tell them who you are really quickly and where you're located and that stuff. So
Sure. So I'm Jessica Hansen. I am in Wilmer, Minnesota. If you want to reach out to me about anything before when Michael features me next time or another time, just look up wilmerhypnosis.com and you will find my contact info. I'd be very happy to share anything that I can help with. But yeah, it's really fun. Stick your neck out there, go to a health fair, job fair. It will improve your street hypnosis skills or your stage hypnosis skills. You will think on your feet, but it's a blast. So please do it.
And everybody, this is the thing that I love about Jessica, 24/7. She just seems to be going after something. She's, when she's not seeing clients, she's not wasting her time, and she contributes a lot to a couple of the groups that she's in. So if you can catch a little bit of that from her next time, or you could catch a little bit of it right now, she is in the room. And if you're within 6 feet of your computer and not wearing a mask, there's a possibility that you just might find yourself much more motivated, because Jessica Hansen is in the world letting you know that that's something that one can do. So Jessica, love you much, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right. Whew. Again, I apologize for the dragging delay. Now, our next guest is going to be introduced in a moment. And in fact, Karen, I'm going to let you do that introduction. But we have a request. And the request is a little bit of opening, what do I want to say? Opening stimulation. About a minute. Y'all want to be stimulated for about 1 minute and 11 seconds. That's something that we're gonna do here. So, Aaron, who do we have in response to all of that grand entrance? Who's knocking at our hypno door?
It's a waste to hear me say this. We should have just gone into the dulcet tones of James Hazlerig, one of the best storytellers in the world. And tonight he's going to treat us to a most extraordinary story about the history of hypnosis. This will be the best way you've ever learned it. So, need I say any more than that? I think it should just be James.
Well, thank you for not putting any pressure on me. I feel great about that. Yeah, Michael asked me, can you do an hour about the history of hypnosis? I'm like, I'm not sure I could do 15 hours about the history of hypnosis, but an hour. And he said, well, there are a lot of colorful characters. And I said, there are, and most of them wore purple. And so I'm not going to tell you about every colorful character in the history of hypnosis, but I do want to start off talking about one that I'm sure all of you have heard of, who was noted for wearing purple or lilac robes and carrying a staff and presenting himself in a very grand way when he would walk into a room where he would have people hold on to copper rods attached to barrels full of water, and he would direct his magnetic energy, and he literally considered what he did to be directing animal magnetism. That's where we get the word. Mineral magnetism is when two minerals stick together. But he said that humans, that creatures with a soul or an anima, had animal magnetism, and that's where we get that word. And of course, from his name, we also get the word mesmerize and mesmerism, because he was Franz Anton Mesmer, who was sort of the grandfather of hypnosis. Now, he never heard the word hypnosis. He called what he did magnetizing. And other people called it either magnetism or mesmerism if they weren't quite sure about that whole sort of magnetic fluid theory, because he essentially considered that he was doing something more like Reiki, or directing the force. Really, he was kind of like a Jedi. Now, when he would finish doing a session, whether it was a group session, which he would do, by the way, for the public for free. So, Jessica, thanks for carrying on that great tradition. I'm sorry, Mary, thanks for carrying on that great tradition. Or he would charge a lot of money to the aristocrats in the French court. And when he would finish, he would often have some mood music. And he played a musical instrument that you don't see much anymore. It was called the glass harmonica. And now if you've seen, and probably, especially down there in Florida, you probably run into the street musicians. You have all of the glasses filled with water, and they spin their hands over them and play music. It's a very, very ethereal kind of sound. Well, Benjamin Franklin, who was a contemporary of Mesmer, said, there's got to be a better way to do this with technology. So he took a whole bunch of bowls in nesting sizes, put them on a lathe that dipped into water, and he could touch them and play them. And Mesmer was one of the first adopters of this instrument. Of course, Mesmer had a lot of experience as a musician, and in fact, he hung out with Mozart back before he left Austria under a little bit of a cloud, a bit of a scandal. That's another story. But he really understood kind of the show business of healing. And of course, he attracted a lot of attention. And especially he attracted a lot of attention from the ladies of the court. They really loved this hypnotic treatment. And we might get into some theories about that. I don't want to be too racy, but anyway, they pushed for the king to build a special hospital for Mesmer and his students. And the king said, well, how about if we kind of test this theory first? So he appointed a commission of 14 of Paris's and really the world's leading scientists. It was called the Bailly Commission after its leader, Jean-Sauvin Bailly. But by the way, a couple of years ago, I was recruited to teach a history of hypnosis course, and I recorded around 15 or 20 hours, so a great number of recordings in which I totally butchered all of the French names. And one of the students who spoke French afterwards very kindly made a video in which he pronounced the words not correctly, but he said, as a Frenchman would. So I learned that it's Jean-Sylvain Bailly. So Bailly, and my notes are over here. So if I glance over here, I'm not distracted. I'm paying more attention. So he was a great astronomer. They invited the chemist Antoine Lavoisier, who is the father of chemistry. The physician, Joseph Ignace Guillotine, who later on had a certain form of execution named after him. By coincidence, some years after the commission, several members of that commission met their fate on the guillotine. And another person we've already mentioned, Benjamin Franklin. In fact, Benjamin Franklin, because of his poor health, ended up being the host. It was there at his estate in Paris where he was the ambassador from that new brave nation across the sea, the United States. And they said, yes, we're going to test Mesmer's theories. No, let's not invite Mesmer. Let's invite one of his students, a physician named Delon. And so Delon was invited, and they said, we are not going to evaluate whether or not you or Mesmer or any of the students that he's been teaching through his lodges. It was kind of interesting, the structure set up, by the way. You might know about Masonic lodges. And it's not even, you don't even have to be into conspiracy theories to recognize that Masonic lodges were an important part of the Revolutionary era, the United States Revolution and a lot of the French Revolution. So the king was a little nervous because Mesmer taught through lodges. He set up what were called the Sons of Harmony. And that's how they taught. So anyway, he said, look, we're not going to challenge whether or not people have been helped by your methods. Clearly they have. We are going to evaluate whether or not your explanation makes any sense, whether or not you're actually directing some sort of fluid and whether that fluid even exists. So they came up with a number of double-blind studies, which means literally people were wearing blindfolds. And they would have Delon, the magnetizer, go through Benjamin Franklin's garden and magnetize certain trees. This was something people did back then. And everybody knew, you know, if the not hypnotists back then, but the mesmerist magnetized the tree, and then you walked over and touched the tree, it would be as though the magnetizer was working on you. And so they had Delon go through and do that, and then they turned loose a bunch of people who were blindfolded and said, hey, go touch the trees and let's see what happens. Well, people would walk up to some trees and nothing would happen. They'd walk up to other trees and they would suddenly start convulsing and breathing hard and have a fit and fall on the ground and then feel better. The problem is that it wasn't necessarily the trees that Delon had touched that made that happen. So through this literally blind study, they said, look, we just cannot find any evidence. And they spent months and months trying to find evidence for this fluid, and they couldn't. So eventually, they delivered a report to the king that said, look, we can't find any proof of this magnetic fluid that Mesmer says exists. And all of the healings and results are due to imagination. Okay. So they said, so we can't scientifically get behind this. Now, they also sent what was called the secret report to the king. And the secret report said, we are very concerned about the morality of this, because when the magnetizers work with these women of the court, they sit very close together. Their knees are intertwined. Their breath is mingling. And the young women begin to breathe very hard and forcefully, and then they begin to convulse and shake. Some cry out as if in ecstasy. So, look, we're all adults. We know erotic hypnosis exists. Probably some of these mesmerists were managing to, through suggestion, though they didn't think of it that way, actually induce orgasms. Now, we know that in the next 100 years after that, doctors would be charged with curing hysteria which is madness that comes about from having a womb, um, and that they would eventually wear out their arms and their apprentices' arms, stimulating the womb, and that's what led to the invention of mechanical vibrators, which were originally coal powered, which really makes me imagine that it must have been quite an endeavor, you know, harder, harder, faster, faster, shovel on more coal. But anyway, what's really interesting to me, though, is that one of the members of the commission resigned and sent a minority report to the king. And what he said is, dang it, if people are being healed by imagination, we should look into that. We shouldn't just cast it aside because we don't like Mesmer's explanation. And the king went, yeah, okay, who cares? So there was our first, I think, sort of missed great opportunity to have people understand what, at least in my opinion, is going on a little bit more in hypnosis. Now, there's a lot of other fascinating stuff about Mesmer, but I'm just going to hit a few highlights. One of the students of Delon, the man who went to represent the Mesmeric school and disappointed everybody, was a nobleman from the countryside of France named, here's where that student helped me a lot, the Marquis de Puysegur. And the Marquis wanted to be a good landlord to his serfs and tenants. So he used his mesmerism to help them. And one of the things that he did was he magnetized a tree. Now, the problem is that his serfs had not seen what went on in Paris. They didn't know that they were supposed to have what was called a crisis, where they would flail and sweat and scream. So this one young peasant boy walks over to the tree, knowing that something amazing is supposed to happen. He touches the tree and he falls over into an artificial coma, an artificial somnambulism. And the Marquis discovers that they can hold conversations. And the boy feels much better about things afterwards. In other words, it's not Mesmer who came up with this whole thing that we're based on, trance, or at least many of us. It was this guy whose name nobody can pronounce, Marquis de Puysegur. And he called it the magnetic sleep or the artificial somnambulism. Now, it wasn't very long after that. It was around the 1820s that we actually got the first instances of the words hypnotism, hypnotist, and hypnotic. Hypnosis still didn't come in until quite a bit later. And of course, you know, because you had to learn it in that first page of whatever book about hypnosis you first started learning from, you know that those are all derivatives of the Greek god of sleep, Hypnos, because it looked like this guy was sleeping. So it was a fellow named de Cuvier. Once again, thanks to that French student for helping me. Actually, I think he was Moroccan, but anyway. Thing is that de Cuvier wasn't a very colorful character, so we're not really going to mention anything other than to say, hey, he wrote a book in which he proposed those terms. Didn't really matter because they didn't catch on from him doing it, because there were some much, much more interesting, colorful characters hitting the scene. And one of my favorite characters from the earliest history is a fellow known as Abbe Faria, or I think his full name was something like Jose Custodio de blah, 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 blah. Incredibly long name. Now, Abbe Faria was essentially the first stage hypnotist, even though he didn't call himself a hypnotist yet. He was a mesmerist. And he was the first person to get a group of people up on stage and shout, sleep! And that was, around the 1810s, right, that he was operating. And now, a lot of people like to say, well, James Braid was the father of hypnosis, or Milton Erickson is the father of modern hypnosis, or Mesmer was the father or the grandfather of hypnosis. Some people say that Abbe Faria was the first Ericksonian and that he was the father of hypnosis. I don't think of him as the father so much as the crazy uncle who kept saying weird things at the Thanksgiving table. But then later on, at the end of the movie, you find out he was right about all the crazy things that he said that nobody else got. And I think, Michael was mentioning before we started the recording that we need to appreciate the work that stage hypnotists do. And I think it was simply the fact that he was working with so many people that he started arriving at a much better understanding of what was going on. Because at first he believed that he was projecting a fluid at these people. But then eventually he started to realize that it wasn't so much him, it was them. And he became what they called a statist versus a fluidist. And he noted that certain people had more aptitude for responding, right? This is a long time before Stanford starts coming up with susceptibility scales. He starts noticing some people on stage are much better at responding. He also realizes that trance isn't necessary for suggestion to take root. So a lot of these ideas that are very important in modern hypnosis, he's arriving at in 1815. Now he was like I said, a particularly colorful character. He was of mixed Portuguese and Indian descent. He was born in Goa, which was the Portuguese colony in the Indian subcontinent. And he claimed that, in fact, his Indian ancestors were from the Hindu caste, because that gave him an aura of being an outlandish magical figure when he took to the stage in Paris. And he also dressed kind of outlandishly. He wore a turban. He spoke with a thick accent. And I think he really understood how to take advantage of that kind of thing, how to take advantage of looking outrageous and sounding outrageous. Because you've all learned as hypnotists, you use what you've got. There's a bunch of other really fascinating stories about him. By the way, one of the characters in The Count of Monte Cristo is based on him. And, as I was looking into the history of hypnosis, I really wanted to cover a lot about the history of stage hypnosis, but very little is written about that. In fact, almost all histories of hypnosis are written from a therapeutic standpoint. And stage hypnotists are kind of this other who intersect periodically in the story. But Ave Faria really managed to kind of hit both. And, about stage hypnosis, there's some interesting things, though, that I did learn. One of them is that in that era of the 1800s, scientific demonstrations were considered entertainment, right? We all think it started with Bill Nye the Science Guy, but that is not true. In fact, there was Galvani who discovered the galvanic response, which they often demonstrate in biology class with a frog. They hook electrodes up to a dead frog and it twitches. Well, his nephew went on the road with a corpse of a human and did that. And the corpse would sit up and grimace when he shocked it with electricity. And of course, electricity was this big, exciting thing that was really new to the world. Well, Mary Shelley saw Galvani's nephew do this demonstration, and that inspired Frankenstein. So there was another kind of scientific performance that people would do that was what you did if you dropped out of medical school. You got a hold of ether, and you got a bunch of volunteers on stage, and you gave them all ether, and you told them to act crazy, and they would. And those were called ether frolics. And if you look at the structure of an ether frolic, it is exactly the same structure as a hypnosis stage show. You get a bunch of volunteers. Instead of giving them ether, you induce hypnosis and you get them to act silly. Same kind of structure. Now, there was a group of these stage performers who adopted a kind of a scientific veneer. They were called the electrobiologists. right? Now, they weren't claiming that it was animal magnetism, but it was some form of electricity. And they would have a sort of a magical coin, except it wasn't magic, it was science, right? And they would hold it up and they would say, look at the coin. Look at the coin. The electricity is going from the coin into your mind. Look at the coin. Focus all of your attention on it. You, sir, you are not suitable. Go back to your seat. They were the first ones to do that. And they would essentially put on stage hypnosis shows. Now, the thing is, of course, you know what it's like to deal with an audience that is skeptical. Well, back in those days, people would often do really outrageous things, such as run up on stage and try to break people out of their trance. And in fact, sometimes they would go so far as to walk up and stab a volunteer in the leg to see if they would come out of trance, to try to disprove this thing that was going on. And so there's a lot of criticism, especially in the early 20th century, of some of the excesses of stage hypnosis. Things like telling somebody that they couldn't taste an onion and then having them eat it, or taking really foul-smelling chemicals under their nose and saying you can't smell it. I think a lot of that really rough, brutal stuff came about as a response to those audiences being really skeptical in that way. So there were a lot of really colorful characters doing that stuff that we don't know very much about. And I think that's really a sad thing. Now, also around this time, hypnosis starts entering fiction. And you start getting stories about, hypnotists who can use their amazing powers, or mesmerists who can use their amazing powers to seduce young women and do all of the things that, the terrible tropes about hypnotists do. But you also had this one writer who got really interested in mesmerism, and his name was Charles Dickens. And a big part of mesmeric trance back then was also remote viewing. So he wrote a play in which people are using remote viewing to find out what's going on with the expedition to the North Pole. So that's the framework for his play. So it's just kind of interesting to note there's people we've never heard of who were prominent, and people who are household name today. And of course, if you've never done a hypnosis session based on the Christmas Carol, come on, it's all right there. Christmas past, present, and future. Now, you really can't talk too much about hypnosis without talking about James Braid. Now, James Braid wasn't necessarily the most colorful character. He didn't wear purple. In fact, he really wanted to get away from all of the hooey and the supernatural and the woo-woo or the wow-wow. Because he went and saw a stage hypnotist and he said, this is bullshit. And then he went back the next night. He said, wait, did he just get somebody's eyes stuck shut? Wow, that's amazing. Right? Which is funny to us because we know that's like, the easiest thing to do. But he said, I think this is all about the eyelids. It's a state of eyelids. So he went home and he called, one of his maidservants over and had her stare at a candle for a long time until her eyes got really tired. And boom, she went into trance. And he's like, I figured this stuff out. And within a month, he was giving a lecture. Within a year, he was publishing a book explaining what was really happening. So the instant expert problem that we still have today, nothing new. But Braid said, this is the sleep of the nervous system, or neurohypnotism. He called his first book Neuropnology. And he really started off believing that it was a physical state. Now, that book was a bestseller. It went all over the place. It got translated into French and many other languages. It was incredibly influential, even though he never set up a school or taught anybody himself. But his methods, his ideas became very influential. Now, the thing is that after he wrote that first book, he kept experimenting. And he, after about 5 years, he said, you know what? It isn't about the eyelids. It's maybe not even so much a physical state. It's really about focusing, right? And we've all heard that hypnosis is a state of intense focus, right? He said, it's focusing on one idea. It's monoideism, which, you know, is a term that has never taken off. I thought it would be great to you know, call my business Harmony Monoideism. But it turns out that nobody is Googling stop smoking monoideism. So I had to ditch that idea. So the thing is, that book got lost for about 50 years. So this is around 1842 that he's publishing all of this. By the way, this is the same decade in which spiritualism starts, but that's a whole other story. And so his more progressive ideas get lost for about 50 years. Now, during those 50 years, there's some other kind of interesting characters that come into view. And one of them is not a hypnotist or a mesmerist. He was actually a chemist. And when I say he's a colorful character, it's a bit of a pun because he did a lot of work with dyes and color theory. His name was Michel Eugène Chevreul. And a lot of hypnotists have heard of what we call Chevreul's pendulum. And Chevreul's pendulum is not different from any other pendulum. It's a weight on a string hanging there. And we've probably all gone through a class where we were taught to use that to get in touch with the unconscious mind. And in fact, there's even an article out there which has been reprinted numerous times on the internet on different websites. And for a while, if you typed in Chevreul's pendulum, it came up. And this article, I'm not going to say who it's by, but his name rhymes with Sal Canyon. And it is in the first paragraph full of factual inaccuracies about Michel Eugène Chevreul, down to getting his name wrong, his profession wrong, and the century in which he lived, and saying that he discovered that you could use this to contact the unconscious mind. Now, Chevreul wanted to debunk the use of pendulums and dowsing rods and other similar devices for the purposes of obtaining information. Because see, back in those days, people were getting really into this, and they would say, man, you can do things like anywhere in the world that you are, you can ask the pendulum what time it is, and it'll move back and forth that many times. Pretty cool trick, right? There were even people inventing these sort of things that looked almost like an oil derrick with a pendulum hanging in the middle, and they would touch it and determine and hold on to a piece of some element and determine its properties, right? The pendulum knew the properties of that rock they were holding. Well, the thing is that Chevreul started doing blind testing and discovered the pendulum doesn't know anything that the person holding it doesn't know. So he started proposing that this was some sort of mental reflex, which then, and that was 1854 when he published. About 20 years later, an Englishman named William Benjamin Carpenter takes his ideas and runs with them, translates a lot into English, and he coins the term idiomotor action and starts coming up with this understanding that our thoughts affect our bodies in ways that we're not fully conscious of. In fact, that's really where the idea of the unconscious mind starts to be formulated, which of course, you know, Freud and Jung and all those guys are going to pick up on. But before we get to them, remember I said that those books by Bray got translated into French? Well, a couple of Frenchmen really took to these books. In fact, there were two main schools of thought, and one of them was this guy named Charcot. And Charcot ran a huge mental institution. and he was called the Napoleon of neuroses. And is really, the father of neuroscience. And he was a very imposing figure. And he would put on demonstrations, right, where he would bring the mental patients, who were almost all women, because he specialized in treating, remember that thing called hysteria, which is crazy because you got a womb, right? It's a very misogynistic kind of thought, though he did say, well, men can have hysteria too. But basically, there were these mental patients that he had, some of whom probably weren't all that crazy, but just figured that it was easier to live life there than, the hassles of life otherwise. And he would put on demos, and he did all kinds of crazy things, like using gongs, flashing lights, all kinds of stuff to induce hypnosis. And he came up with all of these theories of stages of hypnosis, all based on what these mental patients were doing at his demos. What he didn't know was that his students were coaching the mental patients on how to behave when he was doing these demos. So he was way off, and said that, hypnosis is related to hysteria, and he had all these really crazy ideas. Now, meantime, off in the countryside of France, there's this little country doctor who dressed like a peasant, and had picked up one Braid's book, Neurohypnology, and said, I'm going to try this stuff. And he discovered it worked. And so he would work as a doctor all day long doing normal doctor stuff. And then he would do hypnosis, or hypnotism really is what they called it, for free after hours. And then he didn't have any more time to be a doctor because people were just lining up. Well, at the nearby university in Nancy, which still isn't a big city, this is like Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas, right? Which is my alma mater. It's not UT, right? But in Nancy, this fellow named Bernheim hears that there's this country doctor doing hypnotism, and a lot of people are getting help. And he says, well, I need to go prove that this is nonsense. So he goes out and says, hey there, Mr. LeBeau, or Dr. LeBeau, show me what you've been doing. So LeBeau very humbly shows him. And after 3 days, Bernheim says, okay, you're right. Teach me how to do this stuff. So the two of them, with a couple of other professors, set up the Nancy School of Thought. And they started arriving at the same kind of ideas that Abbe Faria had come up with, 50 years before, which was that you didn't necessarily have to have a state in order for suggestion to be effective. That yes, there was such a thing as trance, and that trance itself could be curative, but that in fact, it was really hard to draw a clean line between what was trance and what wasn't, and when was suggestion going to take effect. Now, both of these schools then started essentially a flame war, writing letters and pamphlets, arguing with each other. And now, though I mock Charcot a little bit, I will say that Charcot and his people, one of whom, by the way, was Gilles de Tourette, which we've heard of in Tourette syndrome. Both schools came up with some really interesting experiments that discovered a lot of really interesting things, which then somehow, because hypnotists don't study their history, got forgotten and lost and had to be rediscovered by a guy named Richard Bandler. They discovered things related to changing personal history and submodality shifting. They discovered that you could induce false memories, which, of course, we had to wait until the 1990s for Elizabeth Loftus to say, hey, guys, I think that we've been inducing some false memories here. 100 years before, people already discovered that. But nobody studies history, so it was lost. They even attacked the question of, can you make somebody do something that violates their moral code? And this was actually Charcot and his guys who did it. They had one of their mental patients hypnotized and told her, this is a knife. Now, it was a piece of paper, right? Go stab this guy. This gun is loaded. Shoot this guy. Of course, it wasn't loaded. This is poison. Give it to that guy. She littered the stage with corpses. They're like, see, obviously you can make people do anything with hypnosis. And then one of the fellows there said, hold on just a moment. Madame, the demonstration is over and you are back in your chambers. It is time to disrobe for your bath. Milady, it is time to disrobe for your bath. Go ahead, disrobe for your bath. And she looked over and said, oh, hell no. Thus proving that somewhere in her mind, she knew the difference. And anybody who's been a volunteer in a stage show, you know that weird, it's kind of real and it kind of ain't feeling. So they solved so many of these problems. They answered so many of these questions. And then most of what they came up with got forgotten, except that they did organize the first hypnosis convention. They called them congresses, and they had their flame wars face to face. And Charcot and his doctors of neuroses argued and shouted with the professors from Nancy, and eventually they came about to agree, partly to disagree, but mostly to come around and say, okay, you know what? I think that suggestion school kind of had it right. And in 1897, Bernheim stood up at the Congress and he said, there is no such thing as hypnotism. There is only suggestion. Of course, if you've read Stephen Heller's amazing book, Monsters of Magical Sticks, you recognize that phrase. There's no such thing as hypnotism. Now, this was pretty amazing, the whole city mouse versus country mouse controversy. But there was one student from that school, the suggestion school in Nancy, who actually, he started out as a pharmacist, we would call him, they would call him a chemist. And he was in a small town, so he knew the people who were coming in to buy things. And he noticed that if you really talked up a medicine before he gave it to people, that it would be more effective. He thought, that's weird. And he went to ask the professors at Nancy, hey, does that have anything to do with what you're doing? They said, yes, it does. Come study with us. So he eventually devised a method that was really fascinating. He would get an individual coming in for a session, and he would do a bunch of what we call suggestibility tests. Postural sway, eye lock, arm catalepsy. He would do enough of those, we sometimes call them convincers, until he felt the person was convinced. And then he would say, there is no need to put you to sleep. Right? That's how they phrased it back then. He said, I simply need you to get a rosary. You have a rosary, of course, everybody had a rosary. And he said, every morning, noon, and night, use your rosary beads. And with each one of these, say, every day, in every way, I am getting better and better. And then he would talk to them for a while as they're standing there, you know, with their arm floating or whatever, and give them a bunch of suggestions and then repeat again, you just need to do that and you'll get better. And people got better. So he wrote a book about it. And that is the first affirmation, which came out of hypnosis. And his name was Emile Coué, not a Milky Way, but Emile Coué. And in 1820, his book got, or in 1920, sorry, we're into the 20th century. His book got translated into English. He did national tours. And it was incredibly influential. Now, there's a whole side story we're not going to get into on how this influenced the Christian Scientists and the New Thought movement and all of those folks, because really we've made it up to probably the most colorful character in the 20th century hypnosis, a man famous for wearing purple suits, kind of like Mesmer, Dr. Milton Erickson. Now, we've all heard a lot about Erickson, and we could talk for hours with his stories. I urge you, if you have not picked up My Voice Will Go With You, order it now on Amazon. get a used copy because you want to keep it in your bathroom. And every time you sit down to clear your head, read a couple of his stories. All right. Because a miraculous thing happens when you do that. It starts to sink in. And I spent a lot of time going, how the heck does he come up with all this stuff? And, there's an amazing story. And I realize we're probably running out of time, so I probably won't go through the whole story of his adolescence in which he grew ill, fitting the profile of the wounded shaman, and nearly dying. How he discovered that simply by visualizing climbing a tree, he could get a little bit of micro movement into his muscles to move his rocking chair across the floor, till eventually he regained the use of his body, though he still had to use a cane. His legs weren't very strong. So the doctor said, if you're going to go off to college, you need to strengthen your arms. So he decided the best thing to do was take a summer-long canoe trip alone, right? 18-year-old farm kid, crippled, canoeing on his own. And he came at hypnosis in a whole different way, which involved a lot of storytelling. And one of the most telling stories in that book, in my opinion, because like I said, you read that book and you go, how the heck did he know? He had like a sixth sense or something. Somehow he just knew. And then one day, in the middle of a session, I just started talking. And it was exactly what the client needed. And I'm like, that's kind of what Eric said. And the next day I read a story about how when he was in college, one night, he wanted to write a letter to the editor of the newspaper because he had a lot of ideas about an article he had read. He wasn't quite sure how to express them, but he put a little piece of paper into his manual typewriter and sat down in his tiny little one-room apartment right next to the bed. And he stared at the blank page and he typed in the date, and he typed in the address, and he typed in dear editor, comma, enter. And he stared at it so long, he started to nod off and said, you know what? I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to get up in the morning and write this letter. So he crawled into his bed. He got up the next morning. And in the half light of the morning, he looked over at the typewriter and saw that the paper had been rolled all the way out and that there was type all over it. And he realized that in the night, he had gotten up as a literal somnambulist and typed something on that paper. So he folded it up and he put it in the envelope that he had already addressed and stamped, licked it, sealed it, sent it to the editor without ever looking at it. And a few days later, got a message back from the editor saying, that is one of the most brilliant things I have ever read. I would like you to write a weekly column. Because he trusted his unconscious mind. And as hypnotists, we can study all kinds of different methods, and we should. We can study history, and we should. We can learn new techniques, but I think ultimately we have to trust that ally that we have inside our unconscious mind. So he eventually became a wise old figure. The Native Americans near where he lived recognized him as a shaman. And he wore purple. And since that day, no hypnotist has dared to be so presumptuous as to adopt purple as their color in all of their personal branding, their outfits, their advertising, and even their luggage. None. Except Jason Lynette. So I want to thank all of you. If we've got a few minutes, I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, James, actually, we've got 8 minutes left. So if anybody's got, and I've got to tell you, because I didn't say it at the introduction, I listened to all of the lectures that you did for HPTI, and they were so wonderful, which is why I had to have you here. I've always thought an interesting way to teach hypnosis and hypnotic phenomena is through the stories of the history itself. I think hypnotists ought to have some experiences with magnetism, and all of that stuff. So I love it when the stories are told that well and they are that compelling. And I have a feeling people are going to be listening to this recording again.
I hope so. And oh, by the way, if you want to experience Emile Coué, you can download his book on PDF for free. And except for the one little bit where he says that you could hypnotize a pregnant mother to influence the gender of her child, or the biological sex, I should say. Except for that, everything else he says holds up to modern standards. Archaic, Callie said. Yes, Gloria.
Would you please repeat the name of the book you're talking about by Erickson?
Oh, sure. It is My Voice Will Go With You.
Thank you.
Which is one of the things that he said, and something that I have said because I steal shamelessly. And it's a powerful thing to say to a client. You're going to go out into the world, and my voice will go with you. So it's the Tales of Milton Erickson, edited by Sidney Rosen. So it might come up as Rosen rather than Erickson, but Rosen is one of his students. And it's 1,000,001 amazing stories. Great stuff.
Yeah, I do think this readily available through Amazon. I hope that.
Oh yeah, and easy read, really enjoyable and easy reread. Like I said, I just put it in my bathroom for a year, and every time I went to the bathroom, I would read a couple more stories. I eventually, I'd read them all, so I started scripture flipping. That's what we call it in the South when you need guidance from the Lord, and you just take the Bible and flip it open and point your finger down and read the verse, right? Which, of course, serious ministers will point out to you is technically witchcraft and you shouldn't be doing it. But
And you could open the Bible and use a pendulum in order to.
you could. That would. I think that would be an amazing.
Sitting on a magnet.
Well, yes, yeah. So, since there's a few minutes, I want to talk about what I see as the through line of hypnosis. All right, because early in Mesmer's career, he saw a guy literally using magnets, and he literally used magnets until one day he forgot the magnets and just said, "I'm just going to pretend I have magnets," and it all worked. Now he was invited to debunk a very popular healer in Austria, who was going around casting demons out of people. And Mesmer looked at him and said, "He's doing the same thing I am. He just is an idiot and thinks it's demons. He doesn't know that he's manipulating their magnetic fluid. Hell, he's probably better at doing magnetic fluid than I am, but he just doesn't know it." Yeah. Right? So the first explanation, and of course this explanation is still around today, it's demons, right? And then you get, it's the force, right? And then, and along with the force, you get the crises. Then you move from that fluid into it's a physical state. And I believe that, yes, we do go into trances, which are physical mental states, but that they're not necessary. And then you kind of shift from the explanation of physical states over to mental states. And then you shift to, I don't need to put you to sleep at all. I just need to have you listen to these suggestions, which is, Emile Coué and Erickson, even though Erickson used trance and Coué was using trance. But as we all understand, sometimes you don't have to induce trance. Sometimes simply stating the suggestion powerfully.
There are many ways to influence people, and James, you have had a tremendous influence on us, and we really appreciate you being here with us tonight. I understand, by the way, for those of you who might not be aware of it, I saw it on the news, and then I got a message from you. But are you surrounded by storms or tornadoes, or what's going on with you?
So it looks like there's some storms hitting kind of north from where I am, but they seem to be passing by here. So we're hoping we'll get a little bit of rain, but hopefully not the hail or the tornadoes.
Great. Well, we're glad that you're safe. And
One quick follow-up question, if you don't mind. Is your app still available?
I believe it is actually. Yeah. It's available for Android. We never developed an iPhone version.
I'm sad about that, but
I know.
I love your app.
Yeah. It's called the Harmony Hypnosis Emergency Validation app. We've made nearly 3 figures off of this app. The free version.
You have an incredible smile.
Oh, hey, there it is. All right. Yeah. So the free version, it just says a few things, and it just looks like a smiley face, and you press it. And if it's working right, it makes noises for you.
There's something special about you.
And then the pay version, which is like $3 or $5, it's not much at all, has a bunch more, and you can customize them. You can put your own affirmations into it. It was just a fun little side project that a friend of mine and I decided to do. Now, a little bit about the creation of that. You heard that lovely woman's voice. She's a good friend of mine, who I know they say you're not supposed to do hypnosis for your friends. Well, I didn't charge her. All right. So, she wasn't my client and my friend. She struggles a lot with anxiety and depression and those kinds of things. So I've done a lot of hypnotic help for her. And I asked her to read and record like 120, or I guess it was 60 affirmations. 120 because I recorded them also. So 60 affirmations. So she comes out of the makeshift recording studio, which is a closet, and she said, "Oh, I finished them all. It's just really weird, but I feel really good right now." But I know, because you just said 60 positive affirmations. Of course you feel good. This stuff works.
Cool. Well, it's a lovely app. I'm glad that I have it. And I have to tell you, every once in a while, I actually activate it. I don't know, unconsciously or
By
something.
accident.
In my pocket, and it's delightful to just have something. It's like the peanuts at a bar that I used to go to. They were complimentary as well.
Yes.
And this really does it. So listen, we are at the end of our time. Karen, we want to just remind everybody, of course, that we're going to be back here a month from now on the 10th Tuesday of next month with Carlos. I was going to say Carlos Castaneda. I know that. Carlos, help me.
Well, now I've lost it.
Casados. Casados. I really did lose that for a minute. That was fun. It must have been that mesmerism that I experienced.
That's right.
And also Thursday night, the presenter series with Karen and Shelley Stockwell. Make a contribution to Mary's project. Go out there to mindgift.org and see if there's something you'd like to record or to send up to them. They would appreciate that. Jessica, I am so sorry that we didn't get to talk to you a little bit more, but we will be doing it again. And hey, everybody, see you at conference. Change your hotel reservations and do what you need to do. And James, if you're ready, we're going to ask everybody to open up their microphones so that they can send you off in a cacophony of love and affection. So everybody, say goodnight to James, and we'll see you all next time.
It was wonderful. Really wonderful.
Thank you, James.
Good job.
Everything I said it would be. Thank you, James. See you soon.
Everybody.
We really loved it.